You know, my colleague from Maine mentions the loss of textile jobs and paper jobs and steel jobs. I talked to one of my friends, Representative Butterfield, and he had at one time in one county in his congressional district, he had 10,000 textile workers in one county. I said, well, how many do you have today? And he said, I have 0. They're all gone. We can do a lot better than this. My basic question to those people who want these trade deals is just simply this. I understand the environmental and the labor standards, and I think those are good frameworks. What I want to know is, in every trade deal, what is the ramifications for our manufacturing base, for our workers, and for our farmers? I think it's a fair question to be able to ask anybody. When I do, I'm told by some folks, well, we're going to redo the trade readjustment for those folks who lose their jobs. That's comfort to somebody like Dave Bavard from Galesburg, Illinois. 32 years at Maytag. His wife has cancer. Health care runs out. And one person suggested that I go back and talk to Dave Bavard and explain to him, if you can believe this, Madam Speaker, I'm supposed to explain to Dave Bavard that there's currency manipulation in China that's causing some of these problems. And I remember saying to that member, well, when I go to Galesburg and say that to Dave Bavard, I better be putting a catcher's mask on, because I think I'm going to get poked. We can't talk to our workers like that, justify the currency manipulation. I'll tell you why Dave Bavard lost his job. I'll tell you why Maytag went to Sonora, Mexico. Because this Congress, under NAFTA, that passed NAFTA, helped those jobs to go to Sonora, Mexico, Madam Speaker. They outsourced those jobs. And this from a company that took $9 million in Illinois taxpayers' money, and the workers gave not one but 2 wage concessions. And guess what? The people in Sonora, Mexico can't afford those refrigerators that they're making. In fact, they're coming across the border illegally because they're not making enough money at that factory. So to my friends at Maytag, I would say thank you for nothing. Look, I am a card-carrying capitalist. I've said this many times, Madam Speaker. I want to see businesses make money. But I also want to see a system of fairness in this whole trade thing. I think it's the minimum we can do is to expect this Congress that when we negotiate a trade deal and when we're looking at a trade deal is to stand up for those very people whose jobs are on the line. These are veterans who fought and defended this country. These are people who want to put their kids through school. They want to send their kids, they want to see their kids get married and be able to afford a home. They want to spend some time and be able to retire with some dignity. Instead, we outsource their jobs. We give them a Trade Readjustment Act that isn't really worth the paper it's written on in the final analysis. It doesn't nearly make it up. And I want to say one thing about that before I just conclude here. Some of the workers at Maytag were told, well, we know you're losing your jobs to Mexico, but here's what you should do. Go into a thing like health care, growing field. My colleague from Maine and I probably ought to take a look at that maybe someday. But they were told, oh, you need to get into a growing field like health care. So 300 displaced workers at Maytag did just that. That was the good news. They went to school for a year. The bad news was there was only room for 30 of those workers to continue in practicum so that they could practice medicine. So what was the response to those 270 people who were left out? Have you thought of going into cosmetology? Well, that's a wonderful thing. That's a great way to treat workers. No, they don't think about cosmetology. What they think about is what should have been and what could have been. What should have been was this Congress, this House, should have said no to NAFTA. And when it did say yes, and I wish I was here, I could have voted against it, should have had a moral obligation to say to those workers, we're going to do everything we can to help you hold on. Didn't. And I am saddened that some members in my own caucus think that every trade deal that comes down is something that we ought to take a look at. Let me suggest this, and I will close by saying this. I ran on this issue for the United States Congress. I talked about it every candidate forum I had. I had 4 opponents in the primary, and I ran on this issue of trade. I said, I will support trade as long as it does not outsource our manufacturing base and that American agriculture has a seat at the table. I won that primary, and I went on to the general election. I ran against someone who supported NAFTA, supported GATT, supported CAFTA, supported all of these Bush trade deals, and I walked out of that election with 57% of the vote. Part of that, I believe, is because the people of the 17th District of Illinois know what it's like. I had 6 clothing and textile plants in my district. I have 3, with 1 ready to go, soon to close. I say, as long as I'm in this chamber, and I don't know how long that will be, I'm not going to vote for a trade deal that will outsource 1 American job, that will take 1 farmer for granted, that will tell people you really don't matter, because you have to look at the whole picture. So to Dave Bavard and to those people who may be watching tonight, from this freshman's perspective, and I can't thank Congressman Michoud for his leadership on this. I met him when I was running for Congress, and I remember one phone call I made to him when I was a candidate, and one of the first questions he said was, "Where are you on trade?" And I told him, and he said, "What can I do to help?" And he's been a wonderful leader on this issue. And this battle will go on. It will end, but the battle will go on. And I'm not giving up. And the people that believe that our manufacturing base can be saved, we're not giving up. I'm going to support the Patriot Corporation, which helps keep American jobs here and stops giving tax credits to companies that outsource overseas. I want fair trade. I'll vote for any trade deal that comes down as long as it meets the criteria that it stands up for ordinary Americans. And with that, I would be happy to yield back to my friend and my colleague, Congressman Michoud, and I'm just honored that I was allowed to be able to participate this evening. Thank you, Congressman Michoud.